Well, thanks, everybody. There we go. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. You could please start with a roll call.
Trustee Rubin,
Yes.
trustee Hallwax,
Yes.
trustee Mealopoulos.
And at this time, public comments. Anyone would like to say anything? Seeing and hearing none, move on to consideration of the minutes for the prior month. Any comments, questions, or a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye, all right, it's approved, which brings us to review of our monthly financials, please.
Right.
Thank you, Nikki.
Problem. Right, included in the packet this evening is the June financial report as revised. So we'll start with that, go over CIP updates and then round up with a review of our financial policies, which is the official kickoff of our budget process. Okay, so for the month of June, the property taxes we have received year to date are more than last year by about 63,000. About 51% of budget, pretty much exactly where we would expect to be with one installment received. We received 74,000, shy 75,000 in June. It was 3,000 less than what we were projecting to receive this month, but we are still on track this year for where we would expect to be. While I still hold optimism that we may receive bills on time, we've adjusted projections out to anticipate them being late this year. So if you look at the financial spreadsheet, the projection spreadsheet, we have bumped those second installment receipts out, anticipating that that's going to be a little late.
But still within the.
Still within the fiscal year. So we are still projecting we'll receive everything by December 31st, just not on a timely basis.
Thank you.
No problem. From a sales tax perspective, this month's receipt is more than last year and 41,000 more than our monthly projection. This is for March sales. We're just over halfway through the year, just over halfway through that budget. Sales taxes are continuing to run high because of the changes that were made by the state January 1. A lot of transactions that were previously counted as use tax transactions are now being recorded under sales tax. From the information we have from the Department of Revenue, it's not going to be a 1-for-1, so we won't see use tax decline by the same amount that we see sales tax increase. They've changed some of how they're sourcing sales tax to what's called a destination point of sale instead of on-premise point of sale. So a lot of this has to do with internet sales and what residents in Glencoe are ordering online, and that's how they're sourcing the sales tax instead of use tax. Whereas use tax was more distributed on a per capita basis, so it's not full redistribution. For June, our alarm permits, parking fees, vehicle licenses, and E911 surcharges are all higher than last year in monthly budget, so those are all running strong. And we have several revenues that are trending down for the year. Places for eating tax, this shouldn't surprise anybody, given recent closures. We do expect to see this increase with the recent opening of Mentions and Picnic. So I would expect this revenue to rebound a little bit, but we are going to see a downward trend until we see something occupy Meg's and the Merlot space.
Isn't Appleday closing too?
It's already closed.
Yes.
They are still doing catering
Stuff, yeah.
on a month-to-month basis based off of a conversation I had with the property owner. They are also negotiating or seeking to negotiate a lease with a new operator of that restaurant. So hopefully this interlude is relatively brief, although I'm sure that a new operator is going to do quite a bit of construction in the space. So, but yeah, she's still doing catering probably through the summer is what it sounded like. So we do
door still says that.
Yeah, we do collect places for eating tax on catering. So
We are still receiving revenue, it's just not as much. From a utility tax and telecom tax, those are trending down, which is not a surprise. The utility tax is highly geared towards weather, so we haven't seen utility bills come out from the recent heat. We'll see that in a few months from now. So I expect that revenue to recover a little bit. Use tax is down for reasons we've already talked about. Personal property replacement tax remains down because of that over allocation with the Department of Revenue. That was also reduced in the state's recent budget, so I don't expect that revenue to rebound anytime soon. So we'll roll that into our budget projections into 2026. Cable franchise fees are also down. I think that still might be a timing thing, but we'll continue to monitor that as the year goes on. Expenditures are running higher than last year, but only 44% of budget. Really, that's mostly timing. And our annual revenue projections, when we look at revenues only, we're projecting the general fund to end the year at 427,000 over budget. When we add expenditures into that equation, we are projecting that we would draw the general fund down by about 4.4 million. We had a plan to draw down in the budget of 4.8 million, so we're not that far off. That makes sense with the projected revenue surplus. Fund reserves at month end, we've adjusted this for the audited numbers, so this includes just our unrestricted cash balance at 15.6 million, which is about 53% of operating expenditures. On the water fund side, volumetric revenue is only at about 36% of budget. Again, we're still pretty early in the year, still pretty early in the irrigation system, but we are running 130,000 over last year, primarily due to rate increases. On the fixed charge revenue side, we're just at about halfway through the budget, running about 12,000 higher than last year. On the expenditure side, in the water fund, our expenditures are higher than last year, only about 36% of budget. This really has to do with the timing of payments for the influent line and also the water main project that's still underway. So I would expect those to kick in as we get later into the summer, early fall. When we look at just projections for revenue, we're projecting that the water fund will still end the year with $106,000 over budget if trends continue. And then when we add expenditures into that equation, we're projecting the water fund to draw down by 2.6 million. We had budgeted a drawdown of 2.8. Again, that's for capital. And we did have some projects roll from 2024 into 2025 that will be finished this year. So that has to do with some of the drawdown there. The fund reserves at month end, these have been adjusted for the audited fund balance. Again, only unrestricted cash. So when I say that, when you look at the audit, we do have a fund balance number that includes non-spendable assets like our water mains, our water meters. So when we take that out, we have reserves at the month end of 3.4 million, which is just less than half of the year in terms of operating expenses. I'll turn it over to Stella for the golf report. Thank you.
Well, the month wasn't that bad, despite some blips in the weather. We were 700 rounds over budget, revenue was over budget, and we were under budget on our expenses for hourly payroll because we budgeted for full capacity and we're not hitting the numbers that we expected. We did have our bio blitz, so there was 113 species identified in a one-day period. We had 83 participants, and this is a national competition. So we send in all our data and we'll find out where we rank with everyone probably in the next couple of weeks. The clubhouse update, the construction site basement excavation is almost complete. They're ready for the concrete piers. So they've dug out the whole basement and then certain additional excavations for these concrete piers that will support the steel columns, and then perimeter excavations for footings and foundation wall. And hopefully they'll start doing that concrete work.
Did we get the rest of the permits yet for that? No.
Well, we're working through it. I'm just sending Monica a note. I'd like to try to put together an update to the construction timeline and share that with you guys. Either this week at the board meeting or in a Friday report.
Thank you.
Moving on to the remaining funds, our debt service expenditures are on target. We talked about that last month. Capital projects fund expenditures are at 39.1% of budget. Again, this is really timing, as Stella mentioned. We're starting to see the expenditures pick up with the clubhouse property, so I would expect this to catch up pretty quickly in terms of what our budget projections are. MFT, there hasn't been too much activity lately. Those expenditures are about halfway through budget, on target. And again, really with the major budgeted expenditure in this item is crosswalk improvements this year. And our pension funds are on target. We've had no new retirees this year, so we're about 50% of budget where we would expect to be. On the personnel side, our full-time salaries and pensions are running about 578,000 higher than last year, primarily due to vacant positions that were filled year over year when we look at full-time salaries, and also the increase in pension year over year. We did have a bigger increase last year and we are going to have into 2026. No new notifications from vendors on tariffs so far. So we are continuing to watch that, as you know, that could change at the moment. And we're still seeing labor shortages drive wages higher, both when we're hiring, but also when we're contracting with professional services. Our commodities are still running lower than last year. They're only 46% of budget, and our contractual services are also lower than last year, only 40 to 43% of budget. And then CPI was released today at 2.7% year over year. Still not where the Fed wants it to be, but could be worse from where we were previously. Any questions from the treasurer? Moving right along, the CIP. The two projects we have going before the board this month are both bridge related. First one is the Scott Avenue Bridge final engineering. If you can remember, we did think that earlier this year that we were going to do spot steel repairs on Scott Avenue. And an additional inspection found that we delayed that. So those spot repairs are included in the final engineering, and that will be performed next year. And then also is the Sylvan Road Bridge resurfacing project. So these are some repairs to the Sylvan Road Bridge. This project was bid out earlier this month or late last month, June, and we'll be awarding that contract this week's board meeting. Changes to the CIP timeline, just an update on the construction progress for the new and redundant filter influent line repair project. Construction went well. The new line was installed, it's operational. We have our IEPA permit, but we've just kind of extended the construction timeline. Part of the scope is to do some repairs to the original influent line in these settling basins, and just with the water production being where it's at in the summer, it's going to be easier to complete these repairs in the fall when water production is lower. I think we're going to have to pump down one of the settling basins to complete some of those repairs. So just extending that construction timeline, but I think we're expecting it's all still in the original scope of the project. Sanitary sewer rehabilitation for the IICP program, that scoping has continued to be delayed. It's just ongoing coordination between us and our consultant trying to finalize what work we want to complete this year. And then lastly, the last change to the schedule is the purchase of our AED replacements. We had applied for a grant through the Metropolitan Mayor Caucus Powering Safe Communities grant program. We had expected that they would announce it at the beginning of July and we could purchase this month, but our application still says pending. So hopeful that that's not bad news and that we will receive the grant, but that purchase will be delayed until next month. I know this is not on the agenda, but I thought I would take the opportunity to give you an update on where we're at with the 2025 lead service line cost share program. In 2025, we've received 19 new applications. We had eight applications roll over from 2024. So the total amount that we're looking at being requested in dollar values of those 19 new applications and 8 carryover applications is $184,100. We still have,
I was gonna say that's less than the budget. It's quite.
it is quite a bit. So we still have 39% of our budget remaining at $115,819. Just to also put this in context, we've only paid out 14 applications. So the numbers that I'm reporting to you are the numbers of people who applied. Some of those people are still in progress, getting their final inspections performed, passing restoration and all that before we pay them out. So we do still have a good amount of budget left. Our group meets on a regular basis to talk about the program, to talk about planning and adjustments. So we may be sending out an additional letter to try to boost activity in the remaining part of the year. So
That answers the question.
yes, yeah. Just so I mean, part of the purpose of that group is just creative thinking on how to keep homeowners, Fed Love Services engaged and informed, and talk about compliance with the program.
So this is a administrative mandate, though, not a statutory mandate. For lead service. So what I want, is the federal government gonna say, yeah, no, we don't care?
No.
I think there's both a state and federal
Yeah,
administrative mandates. So I think the IEPA is going to continue if the EPA changes course.
right. There was a push to change the rule to shorten the deadline to a 10-year timeline, and I think that has been given the
People.
yes. I have not heard any rumblings about the timeline for this program changing. But as Phil said, I don't expect that this would go away because the IEPA has adopted its own regulations, and that's who we're reporting to.
And given just the nature of what it is we're doing, helping our residents in this regard, I think, I'm all in favor personally.
Oh, I'm not,
Increasing
I'm not
communication.
mostly suggesting
Yeah.
we change our plan. But it's not far-fetched to think that the entire mandate could vaporize. I mean, you could have the federal government
If it was
saying,
purely federal,
well, and the federal government could say,
whether it goes away or not, you will never hear about it, or many of them.
I would say there is, the risk that ties back to that point is while we haven't received any, if there are federal dollars that are being funneled into these programs across the country and the federal government changes its mandate, I would assume those dollars dry up too. And so it'll be interesting to see whether that happens. IEPA, it has resources that are flow through from the feds. Those could dry up, which could mean the IEPA thinks about its mandate differently. So I think we'll have to wait and see on some of that, but I think those are some risks relative to that.
One last update, just some good news on the CIP. The emergency weather sirens were installed. If there's anything to add to that, but some good news there. Any questions? Yeah.
We just provide an update on the do the project inside.
Yes, so this week they were finalizing the work at the intersection of Dunn and Vernon. There's a lot of work, there's a lot of activity in that intersection, and so closing it was just beneficial to the contractor to try done as quickly as possible. Moving on from there, there's going to be a boring component, where they're boring the last phase of water main from Vernon to Green Bay Road. So that may start sometime this week, as early as this week, and they'll continue on to the next couple of weeks. And then the last big push will be the tie-in. But in general, they've obviously experienced some delays. We thought the closure was going to happen much sooner than it did. I think the timing actually worked out okay. of when Dundee was closed that first week of July. So we're working with them to try to just make sure everything stays on schedule. The goal is to have everything wrapped up for school staffing session,
Including the sidewalk.
including the sidewalk, yes.
A couple questions, please. I'm curious about the engineering design, so Green Bay. Sorry, for the Green Bay Trail and Sheridan Road sidewalk. So we're in the design phase right now. Is it tentatively planned to be constructed?
At this point, we're thinking that it's gonna have to be constructed in 2027, just with the final permitting and coordination that we're gonna have to complete
And
next
we
year.
got funding, so funding for that.
Mhm.
So-
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have until 29 to spend that down,
Mhm.
so we have some time.
Okay. Our streetscape and parking study implementation, I think it's for village board approval in August. But then construction, wait, a little confusing here.
The-
This construction.
No, I guess
We're not
I should-
I think that just needs to be updated.
Yeah, that timeline should be
Oh.
updated.
Because I think also we're gonna do some more public engagement as well. with maybe a website,
Correct.
So maybe we want to cover.
No, thank you. Yeah, I think that we were optimistic that we were gonna be able to have something to move forward with,
Yeah.
in August, but yeah, we are based on last month's presentation, we're gonna go back and get more public feedback. I think we're really gonna have to evaluate the timeline for the rest of the year based on that, to really think about what we'll be able to accomplish with this year.
I would anticipate the
Interesting.
likelihood of any construction this year is zero.
Oh, yeah. Me too.
What I would anticipate though is as we sit down for budget development in the next few months. At least rolling over the resources that are in this fiscal year's budget into next year. And then to begin to assess, because all of it still has to be engineered.
Yeah.
What we can actually accomplish in 2026. And there are some, I think, easy kind of low hanging fruit that we know. Maybe it's the intersection improvements, the crosswalk improvements, that kind of thing. But yeah, my sense at this point is that we will come back to you guys in September with some updated recommendations and we'll go from there.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Policies
Okay,
and red line.
very
Favorite.
exciting, very redlined. Okay, so this is our.
No, this is the kind of red
Yeah,
line.
right.
Not that kind, right?
This is our official kickoff of the 2026 budget. You can believe it, in July. This is really kind of the first step that we asked the finance committee for guidance on that will help us prepare a draft budget for your review. So I'm just going to roll down a few of the red line changes that we're recommending. And then I would welcome any of the committee's feedback or questions. Once we're done with our discussion here tonight, any of your feedback and these changes will be rolled into the draft budget that you'll see in November. October. Hopefully you'll approve it in November. Okay, old habits die hard. Our first recommended update is to our property tax policy. Our general intention levy, property tax levy is, you'll all recall, with the village's home rule status, we did approve an ordinance codifying that the village would continue to abide by the property tax extension limitation law, which is the lower of CPI or 5% year over year. The Department of Revenue was actually timely in announcing the CPI limit this year for the tax levy. It's at 2.9%. So consistent with past practice, we would recommend that we would be increasing the property tax levy by that 2.9%. On the abatement side, we have historically abated the 2020 and 2023 water bonds. Historically abated anything that is issued solely for water, specifically the alternate revenue GO bonds, meaning that we will tell the county, please don't levy taxes for these two bond issues, and we will instead pay that debt service back using water. So we're recommending again to abate the tax levy on those two issues. I am just recommending some cleanup and deleting our limited tax debt. As a home rule unit, the village no longer needs to use this debt tool, so I'm just recommending that we strike that. On the management fee side, again, consistent with past years, pending further analysis, I'd like to roll this in with our fee and fine discussion. That will be coming before you within a month or so. And the fee and fine charges for service, we are currently doing a survey of our surrounding communities with a specific focus on home rule revenues. And those revenues in particular that would help us shift some of the tax burden away from the property tax levy and also share the love, if you will, with non-residents as well. So we're hoping to make a more comprehensive recommendation to the committee in terms of which fees and fines we recommend changing, as well as any new taxes that we could implement outside of the grocery tax that we've already authorized. We have two surplus reserves. One is with IRMA. The other is with IPBC. IRMA is our insurance pool for our property casualty insurance. IPBC is our insurance pool for our medical and dental insurance. We do have healthy reserves in both of those pools, primarily reserved for large claims, whether it be property casualty or large medical claims. They can be used to offset deductibles. Last year, we received direction from the committee to start drawing down our IRMA reserve. We do have a couple safety related items that have popped up on the second floor that we may be seeking reimbursement for, including the replacement of an electrical panel that was not previously identified at the beginning of the project. And then we also are recommending drawing down on those reserves to help offset our premium increase for 2026. And if you recall, we did do that in this year's budget as well. So IRMA will just allow us to take that off the top of the premium.
I'm throwing this out on the table without having talked to Nikki about it first, so I'll just clarify that. It's been a while since we've had a conversation about our deductibles. With IRMA, they still remain at $50,000. I think it's probably been 6 years, maybe 7.
Not that long, because we took it down since I've been here.
Yeah, we took
Okay.
it down from
Right.
100.
Right,
Good
so
memory.
the question that I just wanted to throw out to the committee is, do you want us to at least take a look at if we were to drop those deductibles? If there's a,
25 or
what sort of financial impact that might have for us if we think there's value.
How often are we allowed to, is that an annual contract or?
I think you can adjust it annually. Yeah.
Sure. I have a slightly different question. Since we can draw out the excess reserves from either sources. Money's money. It's fungible. What kind of rates of return are we getting historically from these sources versus other pools of money that we have? And should we leave more money with these folks if we're getting a better return?
very similar, to be honest with you.
Okay.
IPBC and IRMA are members of the same professional organizations that we all belong to. They all use similar investment vehicles. I wouldn't say that any of them are investing in gangbuster equities or
One would hope not.
international markets because
One would hope not.
their
Safe and
intent
secure.
is, yes, their intent is to preserve principle as well. I know the historical perspective of the village has been, well, we should leave reserves with IRMA because they're not subject to the same statutory regulations as the village. That is true. That doesn't mean that they're taking advantage of it. So the reality of it is they're invested in the same state pools and money markets that we are. So
Okay.
it's kind of
Okay, so there's no material. Okay, that's.
We can-
funny.
That's a great question.
we-
That's a great question.
If you want us to take a look at the deductibles, we can get some
Okay.
updated data on that for you too.
This would be an interesting year to look because we have had a high volume of claims.
Yeah.
So this would be an interesting year to do the analysis of how much we would save or spend based off of what we've had to pay out of pocket this year.
Is it just a per, I forget, is it a per claim only or is there an aggregate?
Per claim, 50,000 per claim. And we do have an umbrella policy that goes over that, but we're still out of pocket for 50,000.
Until you hit the umbrella.
Correct, and that's property casualty and also workers' comp.
Okay, when's the umbrella kick in?
No, I'm sorry, over two. So
Have we hit that?
we have not.
Well, that would be, I mean, you have your $1,000 deductible and then if somebody tapped you for $5,000, the underlying policy would pay them over $2,000 would be umbrella. Okay. That's how it works.
Correct. Yep. So the danger, I think, in the 50 is that,
So it's still 50 per claim, there is no aggregate. Okay.
and
They don't, that's not a feature they offer.
I don't believe they do.
Well.
They aggregate.
they do not.
Okay,
allow it.
okay, I think it's always,
But you can do deductibles as low as $5,000 if you'd like.
I think less than that. And then
I
finally
think-
raise that lower
I
tier.
think they used to allow 2,500, but they just raised it.
Yes, the last one's.
That's a crazy love.
Yeah.
$2,500.
It's
Yeah,
expensive.
you're
I'm
paying
sure
for
you
it,
pay
one
for
way
it.
or another. We can look at the tiers below. It's not like choose your own adventure. There are tiers.
Yeah.
So I think the next tier down is 25. Yeah.
Good idea.
And I think.
Wait,
when
if
we
you do
ask them
that,
to run-
it'd be 25 for like a year.
It would, right.
Or
Or depending on like what we.
Right.
Okay.
We could reassess it annually.
Got
You're guaranteed to be late. We're always looking back and. We're glad we're not city of Chicago.
Oh.
So it sounds like there's nothing really at stake between leaving the money in PERMA or taking it out because you make the same amount. If we were to leave it in PERMA, can we get it in any event when we need it?
Yes, they're
Okay.
very quick.
Mhm.
So-
We have historically drawn on it for like safety related items. I think last time we did it was probably the electrical panel in the garage, maybe.
Across the street,
Or
yeah.
the drone. I think we also
We used it for the drone.
And turnaround time from the time you request it is usually 48 hours. They
that's
electronically deposit it, so. So there's nothing else on Irma and IPVC pension funding. We talked about this at length last time, so I'm not going to go through this in detail, but really just continuing fire pension pay to go. And then our actuarial recommendation is a 6.9% increase over this time last year. One consideration for the committee that we may be mindful of, if the legislature does move forward on any kind of tier 2 pension rollback, that really will trigger us to have another discussion with the actuaries. It's been some time since we set that pension funding policy that's in here. We've reached our payroll growth floor with this latest actuarial recommendation. So we're finally at that point of a rolling amortization. All the assumptions that we were changing were there. So it's not a great time to change it again because we haven't even had a chance to see if this works. But if tier 2 does get enhanced, we're gonna have to talk about that again and bring them back. So just something to keep in mind.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Right now, as it is, a portion of our pension liability gets paid through property tax directly. In other words, there's a separate assessment for it. but it's well below what we actually spent. And so the question becomes, do we want to think about changing that in light of hopefully other things that we'd be doing to put the pension liability, just say to people, you know, the pension liability is the pension liability, and we think that actually is something that ought to be paid through a property tax. You can see it every year on the bill and understand what it's for, which is public safety, and deal with it that way as opposed to other sources of revenue that we have, which is what we're using to pay for it. We have to figure out what we would do, certainly early years, to offset, et cetera. I mean, we promised compliance with PTO. And I think this would be an offshoot. I don't know if we go for a referendum and ask the village what they want to do, but or we put together a package of things that would be an offset, and then we would start phasing out the offset, et cetera, so that it would take effect over some period of time. I just think, especially if they hit us with tier 2, that's going to be, I'm just afraid of what that number is going to look like.
Yeah, I think we'd like to explore a little bit. To some degree, it's a little bit like a balloon, right? That you have a certain amount of money and you're taking some from over here and some from over here, putting it together to do what you have to do. I think we'd like to look at it in the context of home rule and the context of alternate revenue sources that could offset the pull from the general fund, right? So if we use more of the tax levy for pensions, dedicated for pensions, we lose something from the general fund levy. Can we replace that? Probably, because we're also not going to take from the general fund to pay the pension. So it's a little bit of, is it the same pool of dollars? But as it grows, as it changes, if tier 2 changes are rolled back, I think that's particularly where it gets a little bit more scary. So I think we'd like to try to do that, a little bit of that analysis in the development of the budget, and the development of the overall revenue schema, if you will, and see how that might work. And maybe then also come back to you guys with some alternatives relative to other revenues that we may want to start to explore, whether we implement them right away or not. But having kind of a purpose for those alternate revenues would be good too. So as we start to build out, and we're just, as Nikki said, this is very much our first phase with you all relative to the budget development process. We've started a bit of that with staff, but the real work of that begins over the next couple of months. As we start to see how the budget falls out, the revenue side is really going to be the new kind of questions that we start asking. So I think if we can work through that and then come back to you guys with some ideas. Does that make sense, Nikki?
It does, and I think from a taxpayer standpoint, what you're talking about is probably a little bit more transparent for the taxpayers to see the full pension liability. And you really just, it's kind of a little bit left pocket, right pocket where you're shifting the levy. In terms of a differential, just looking at kind of estimates, we'd probably be looking to make up about 1.6 million in the general fund if we did that. So it would be likely a combination of things that we can bring to you.
This is something we would have been able to do when we had the home. What would we have done? Who's someone?
Just what we have been doing, which is essentially utilizing other revenue streams within the general fund to offset that pension contribution. Because we're tax capped on it. So even with, even the cap on PTEL, we could never make up the overall tax liability for that pension contribution.
Because the way that the county calculates the tax limit is by line item on the bill. So when we submit the property tax levy, there's like a general corporate levy. You don't see this detail on your bill, but there's a general corporate levy, there's a fire pension fund levy, a police pension fund levy, and P-TEL is calculated on each one of those individual lines, so you can't necessarily shift between lines if you're underneath in a hole, right? Like, and in total, it's probably the best way to say that. So we would just have to continue making up whatever it is from the general fund shortfall. What we might have to do in that scenario is gross up that pension levy slightly, just to ensure that we get the full dollar amount. Especially because I anticipate property tax disputes to tick up this year.
Yeah.
So there's probably gonna be a lot of deductions from the property tax levy. We'll make it up in the following year because of the way the law changed. But that may result in showing shortfalls in the actuarial funding report, which will artificially inflate our contributions. So we'll have to play with that a little bit, but it's certainly feasible. Good suggestion. Bring something back to you now. And let's see, we did some cleanup on the donation policy. We're a year into this already, and I think we just wanted to make sure that we're clarifying the policy clearly so that we can follow it. In the red line changes, you'll see that we just modified the definition of a donation to include discounts, because that's really kind of what we've been doing in practice. Also clarified that new sponsorship programs that would come before the committee are really just new ones, so that you don't have to see the same ones over and over again. And then also to include the recording component that the committee requested last month, that we keep a running list of everything that the Public Safety Foundation has donated to us. So we'll be reporting that to the Finance Committee. The last one is this exciting new policy. Wish it was a little bit more of an exciting topic. But I will credit our assistant manager, because this was his idea. As you're likely aware, typically the village will prepare a list of surplus property that is no longer has material value. And because that property was acquired with taxpayer funds, we do have to dispose of it within in public. So what we are proposing, just to streamline this operation, because this came up with the second floor renovation, is we're getting rid of metal lockers that have little to no value to anyone. Is there a way to streamline this to allow the village manager to dispose of those assets in the same way that's required by law, in the most economical way for the village? If they have a market value of less than $1,000, could we do that administratively? And then anything over $1,000 would still come before. And then we would provide a report on an annual basis of anything that was disposed of administratively.
What's the $1,000 apply to? Is that, I assume it's not one locker, but the group of lockers?
Yes.
I mean, it's the same
Yeah, the
question as the
aggregate.
deductible.
Right.
Did you need lockers?
No,
If you'll cart them away.
no.
You can have it.
They're partially smashed.
They're distressed.
They're distressed.
Shabby chic.
Yeah,
Shabby
some
chic.
wild parties up there. But they've got-
It's.
I think it was getting them out of the.
Should have been for sure.
Rough removal.
People had a lot of fun, goggles and sledgehammers.
We have a good track record of getting as much useful life out of some things as is humanly possible. So when those things do get disposed of frequently, in the case of the lockers, they are essentially at scrap value, right? And those are not, it's not zero, but it's also modest. And, I think those lockers were somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 years old. So what we're just looking at from this standpoint is a streamlining effort. It's also in a building that has little excess available storage space, a little bit of a practical point of how to get rid of stuff that is just literally taking up room. So that we can free that space up for whatever other purposes that may be necessary for it. So. It's a good suggestion from Adam.
Good job.
Our intent is not to dispose of any vehicles or anything titled with this, so that would still, no matter what the value, that would still go through. Any other questions? That is the last policy.
And all of that was included in policy change, the written changes of policies that were highlighted
Correct.
to the packet. So. I did not have any problems with any of the things you suggested and agreed with them. I thought it was well reasoned and well done. Honestly.
As long as we just continue to, share with the public that we'll continue to work. Revenue sources, not just from our residents. It's fine when we just stress that message to as we move forward. It's good.
Quick question. With the new budget passed in Congress, how soon do you think we can understand what the impact of that will be on our budget? And in our citizens? I was just thinking, my broker was talking to me about how at different levels of impact it had with different amounts of income that you've got coming. So, very wealthy people, $5,000-$10,000, people who are not particularly wealthy, they'll get those write-offs, and people who are not particularly wealthy will end up paying more. How soon how does that impact us? I mean, obviously, this is an upper income community, so folks will have potentially more money overall. But does that provide any opportunities for us, or just as interesting things, or does it make us not eligible for other grants because we're a wealthy community? There's kind of a cascade of things to think about as that comes down. And I'm sure you'll take a look at that, but and of course, it's so new, nobody really knows exactly how it's going to happen. But it could have an impact on our budget for next year.
I do think it'll have an impact on our budget for next year, but we don't rely a lot on federal funding. And I would say, even with grants, it's been hard for us to get grant funding. I don't anticipate it making it any easier. We could take a look at what it would mean for income levels in the community and put out some generic information. I think we have wide-ranging income levels here. One benefit to our community is that the property tax deduction has been increased. So the salt cap is going up, which will certainly be a benefit. I don't know that that would change our trajectory of reducing reliance on the property tax levy. I think that's still our goal, because ultimately the school districts are the lion's share of that tax levy anyway. So I do think the board's desire is still to reduce that liability. But there are some benefits I do think we can take a look at.
I think broadly, the question that can't get answered yet is what changes in terms of how federal funds trickle their way through into the local level, right? So we mentioned a moment ago about EPA. If federal dollars related to EPA focused projects dry up, does that mean those projects dry up? Does that mean anything that might be tied back to that dries up? So those are real questions. As the federal government changes education funding structures, that's not a huge impact directly to the Glencoe schools, but does that augment and change how the state shares education dollars back? So I do think those areas where grants are structured, things like ITEP grants, transportation planning grants, parkland grants, OSLAD grants that our park district has been pretty big recipients of over the years. Those can have impacts on the broader community, right, if those go away. And that may mean projects don't happen, or there's a larger local share. It's so new. And I don't know that even the federal government fully understands the implications of the broader bill, but that's something that we're gonna have to continue looking at. And, the federal bureaucracy is changing pretty dramatically and quickly. And with that may come dramatic, quick changes that we didn't anticipate or even know would happen. So I think it's really just gonna be a matter of continuing to monitor and be mindful of. It may mean local share of everything goes up. Which may mean, this long-standing goal of reducing property tax dependence may become harder to do. So there's a lot of factors, I think, all of which we're trying to get our heads around, and so are our residents, and obviously so are you all, but I think that's what we will begin to learn in the next several months and years ahead. The SALT deduction, as an example, sunsets in 2029 and goes back to 10,000. So will that change? Will that get boosted back up again? Well, it's hard to say. What does it mean from a Medicaid standpoint? In the state of Illinois, it means a lot. To the village of Glencoe, hard to say.
To that point, to the residents, I would be shocked if our local hospital systems aren't affected in a material way, even out here, by Medicaid cuts. Because they treat people from a very broad swath, and that's real, and they're all trying to figure out their budgets.
I would say along those lines also, Family Services Glencoe might have an impact. They do have a lot of their client base that is receiving supplemental resources to accommodate those mental health services. So that could mean either they stop being able to serve those clients, or those clients are finding other ways paying or not. So again, is there a trickle down impact? Yeah, there could be, considering how much work our public safety department is doing with Family Service of Glencoe or any other regional mental health service provider. So yeah, it's a great question. It's a really hard one to answer.
Yeah, we'll just have to monitor it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's our show.
All right, if not,
Motion to adjourn.
all in favor? Aye. All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Again,
Jim.
I appreciate you all being here.
Thursday night at Take It, 5:30. That's the reminder.
Take it not this correct.